I'm Dr. Hackie Reitman. Welcome to another episode of Exploring Different Brains. We have as today's guest the author from San Francisco, Donna Levin, whose latest book, He Could Be Another Bill Gates, is just coming out now. Donna Levin, welcome to Different Brains.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Why don't you introduce yourself a lot better than I did to the audience?
He Could Be Another Bill Gates is my fourth published novel, and it's a follow-up book, not really a sequel to There's More Than One Way Home, which was published about a year and a half ago, both by Chickadee Prince Books. I've been a writer all my life, not necessarily a good writer, but I've always been a writer. I like to quote John Gardner, who wrote in his own book on becoming a novelist that nothing's harder than being a novelist unless that's all one wants to be, in which case, while being a novelist is hard, everything else is harder. And that describes it pretty well. So I've occasionally deviated from, if I may be so pretentious, the calling of writing novels, and it's never worked out very well. So that's what I'm back to doing full time. When you tell somebody you write 3 or 4 hours a day, they say, what do you do the rest of the day? But believe me, it takes all day to get those 3 or 4 hours in. So I was a teacher for a long time at UC Berkeley Extension. Not doing that right now for, very little. It was very little pay for a lot of work, and I'm just taking a break. Okay, so that's a good overview.
Well, you got a lot going on. You're bringing up 4 kids. You're doing many other things. You're writing 4 books. Everything's 4 with you. Now,
well, I must say it's a lot easier now that they're older. Those early years were kind of tough, trying to work right and have the 4 kids at home.
Well, tell us about how, Will's diagnosis. Tell us about the journey you've had, as a mom, and how you adapted to it.
Well, I'll be honest and say it was a tough time. We had no indication at all there was something amiss or, atypical until he was about 2.5. When I look back now, I see that, his gross motor skill milestones were quite delayed, but that's nothing you worry about past the age of 5 once a kid gets there. And then he started reciting the scripts from videos that he'd watched or TV shows that he'd watched. And at first, frankly, we thought, oh, isn't he brilliant? He's memorized a script when he's only seen it once. And then gradually there's this dawning uneasy recognition that that's not necessarily a good thing. But I know with us, I think you fight it a long time. You just want to think your kid is going to have an easy life and is like every other kid. And that was we finally got a diagnosis. Actually, in those days, it was called PDD. It wasn't until several years later that I really started to hear about the autism spectrum and Asperger's syndrome and all those things. Now everybody knows about the autism spectrum, but I will say that things get a lot better. The early intervention is really crucial. Within a year of not necessarily a diagnosis, but knowing that he needed some intervention, he blossomed quite a bit. He'd been very fearful. He'd been very rigid, and he became much more flexible, and the tantrums stopped, and he started a really terrific preschool out here that was run by the school district, and with a really incredible teacher. They're hard to find. These people are talk about a calling. She really had a calling to work with neurodiverse kids. And then he went to kindergarten at a public school. It's interesting that he was only in the second year of this school's full inclusion program. So there was still a lot of resistance among the staff. And if I may say, I'm one of these people now, among the older staff in particular. I mean, like people my age who thought, well, I wasn't trained in special ed, I shouldn't have to deal with this, et cetera. But with each passing year, everybody got with the program more and more. And he was at this school through 8th grade. And it turned out to be a really positive experience. He was elected to the student council. He had plenty of friends, plenty of activities there. It's now that he's a young adult, actually, that he really has a community. And I think that's a lot of what Ascend is about community for the neurodiverse. So and if I may, I accompanied him to the Power Morphicon just about a week and a half ago. That's the Power Ranger convention in Anaheim. It's our 5th time. I think he'll go without me next time. But OMG, those are his peeps. He's just surrounded by people who just get him, get each other, and he just had a fantastic time. And I did too, because I was in the hotel room with room service and a rented movie, and it was great.
Now, you being an author, how much has your son Will inspired your books?
Well, these last 2 books, quite a bit. In the early years, I've always drawn on my own life in my fiction, although also heavily fictionalized it. And my first novel was about a family that was very much about my family of origin. So There's More Than One Way Home is a story of a mom with a 10-year-old son on the spectrum, but he could be another Bill Gates, although it's the same mom 5 years later. The boy now is 16. His name is Jack, and he's inspired by Will, but he's only inspired. He's very much a fictional character, and I write from his point of view. And for me, readers seem to like him.
How do you do that? How do you get in the mind and into that character? That's a talent. That may be your best talent as a writer too. I mean, to be able to do that. Why I'm asking the question is because one of the things I think that gets overlooked in one of the great authors, I think, Stephen King, was his ability to remember and get into the character of what it was like to be a child, who are not little adults, like in his It, and then you'd say, oh my God, I had forgotten when I was a kid, that's how it was. Yeah. And you're able to do that and get inside the mind of somebody on the spectrum. Tell us about that.
Well, I think, every writer has to use her imagination quite a bit. And I'm sure there are people who read it and say, no, that's not right, you got it wrong. But, if I can only write from the point of view of a middle-aged white Jewish woman, it's going to be a very narrow perspective. So, a writer has to be able to write about from the point of view of the opposite sex, or from older people, younger people, people of different backgrounds. There's a lot of controversy now about cultural appropriation, and I'm sympathetic to that, of course. But I think sometimes it may go too far. So I hope nobody comes back and says, you have no right to write from the point of view of the neurodiverse.
What else would you like to tell us about your upcoming book, He Could Be Another Bill Gates?
Well, let's see, it's about making a new family. Anna is the mom. The coincidence, she's not named after my daughter, just although it is one of my favorite names, so that's maybe how she ended up as my daughter's name too. But Anna is, as the mom, her marriage broke up in a very unpleasant way 5 years before, and now she's a single mom, and she has Jack, and then she has 5 and extremely precocious. Her ex-husband wants to think that she's gifted. She probably isn't, but this is an outlet for his own unfulfilled ambitions. And she meets somebody else, another man who also has a son on the spectrum who's Jack's age. And it looks like they may have a future together, but there are 2 ex-spouses in the picture who are going to do their best to keep them apart. And then, of course, there's Jack himself. The book opens with him on the first day of school, meeting a young woman, Ashley, who has dreams of saving the world and who takes an interest in Jack. And of course, he misunderstands that interest and is trying to win her heart at the same time that she is a very nice person, but she has her own agenda and her own problems. So there's really the stories of the mom and the stories of the son with their own romantic pursuits. And although I emphasize that Jack is not Will, but I like to think of him as a tribute to Will at the same time. He's heroic, he's persistent, he's devoted and loyal and loving. He has to fight certain obstacles that people don't always understand, but he just never, ever gives up. And that's the moral of that story.
We'll look forward to the release in October, and we can certainly all use another lesson in determination. And how does our audience who wants to learn more about you, how did they learn more about you?
Well, I finally have a new website. I had an old website that had the blog on the homepage, but if you don't keep that blog updated, then it starts to look embarrassing. Anyway, new website, DonnaLevin.com. Not sure how I came up with that, but there's not a lot of personal information there because I think when people start listing everything they've ever done, I lived in Paris for a year and I have a law degree, both of which are true, by the way, but then it starts to sound kind of pathetic. And I have a Wikipedia page, which also doesn't have a huge amount of information, but you can find me on Wikipedia also. And what else? I mean, beyond that, there's not a great deal of that's interesting, really. I mean, anything that's interesting is in the books.
If someone in our audience is just receiving the news that their child has a diagnosis with autism, what is the one message you would want to give them right here on Different Brains?
The one message would be that the future is yet to be written, that don't take this as any kind of death knell or ominous warning about unemployment and institutions. It's not. It's just not. It's completely unpredictable how kids and even adults develop, and resources and awareness is increasing all the time. So there are a lot of good things you can do. There's a lot of great things your kid can do. That would be number one. Number two would be I'm sorry.
Oh no, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Start with number two.
I was going to say number two would be get involved in the community. That's where the autism community, that's where there's a lot of support and understanding and networking. in terms of other resources.
What other upcoming projects are on the drawing board for Donna Levin?
Well, I'm working on a new novel, and I thought this one would be the easy one. After all, I've written several, so now I've got it, right? And it's not been easy. It's changed a lot, even in the year plus I've been working on it, but it takes place in Marin County, and it's about 4 women of a certain age who get together in a support group, use a talking stick, but this talking stick may have some kind of powers. They're not sure.
Oh boy. See, I love talking to authors when they're at that stage. It's far enough down the road where it's got a little bit of body to it, but you got a lot of leeway. So I'm not going to ask you anymore.
Okay.
I'm not going to ask you anymore.
There's not much more I can tell you.
We hope you keep the books coming, Donna Levin. It's been a pleasure to have you here. And I hope that your son Will and your husband Michael keep up their good work on the board of the Ascend organization. And to your daughters and everything else, you're a terrific role model as a mom and an author and all of the different things you do. So thank you so very much for being with us here.
Thank you.
Exploring Different Brains is a production of Different Brains, Inc. For more information, visit us at differentbrains.org.